Blake, when you die, what's your Wikipedia page going to say you're famous for?
Breaking news. Smart Food White Cheddar Popcorn's revenue has dropped by 35%.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who eats his weight in popcorn every 72 hours. And I'm here with my co-host who didn't know how to make microwave popcorn back in the day, so he only eats smart food, Toby Walters.
I feel like smart food says it all there, buddy, because I am smart.
Well, I endorse smart food as well.
And I do have an opening story, but I feel like I need to interject what just happened before we started recording this podcast. So,
no, Toby, these are tight segments. Tight.
Yes, we're going to expand this segment because it's just too good not to put out there for our listeners. So we have an aux cable. It's 1/8 inch just audio TRS cable that goes from Blake's laptop to our sound devices unit, so we can record our guest. And Blake had it. What'd you do? Prop it up there? Is that what you said?
I needed a place to put it. I put it where it would be great. It would be beautiful. It wouldn't go wrong. I put it in the power spot.
So we have a Furman sitting on a rack, and on the front of the Furman is a 3-prong AC outlet. And so Blake decided, well, I'll just prop the aux cable inside the ground port of the AC plug. And Blake, when you put your in-ears in, what did you hear, buddy?
I was like, that sounds real bad, Toby. I don't like that at all.
Did you hear a...
It sounded just like that. It sounded like when your car gets stolen by your ex-wife.
So, Blake puts in his in-ears and then says, what's that sound? I said, Blake, maybe take the aux cord out of the ground plug. And then what happened immediately?
Oh, it sounded better.
Yeah.
And earlier when I plugged the lights in, a giant spark flew out of the socket at me, and I cursed from where the teenagers could hear. So wow. I'm just having a great day.
And then you showed me 2 SD cards, and you said, are these for audio or video? And I'm like, buddy, they're for data.
Bud, you couldn't make either of them work for the audio.
They were not formatted for our sound devices. Okay, I'm going to get to my actual story now, because after talking
about... You
are
filibustering right now.
After talking about a total idiot for a second, I want to talk about the smartest individual in church production. So I was recently out in California visiting churches. I got to visit 20 churches all across the state.
That's what he said on his time card. We think he actually just did the work of 3 church visits.
So I went to Faith Church in Glendora. It's a suburb outside of LA, and met with Steven, their production director there. So Steven's telling me the story of when he was graduating from college, and there was a well-known speaker there. You know how like universities always like bring in well-known people to give the, what is it, like the graduation address?
It's called the commencement speech. I've done 5 of them.
And so this person ended their speech by kind of saying, this is the moment where typically you would get some big inspirational quote or something. But she said, instead, I'm just going to say, I encourage you all to disappoint your parents. And so he took that to heart, because he was graduating with a PhD in physics from Caltech. And he used that degree to go into church production ministry.
Hey, he went to serve the Lord, Toby. How dare you?
And so I asked him, like, do people joke that you're a real life, like Leonard from Big Bang Theory? Because that's
a good
point. Where they work at Caltech. Like, yes. They are PhD, candidates at Caltech. So very much so. He said he gets that joke a lot. And so I just kind of joke that he is the most overqualified church production person in America. And maybe we have some other PhDs out there that are working at their churches, but I was duly impressed. And then the other opposite side, it's not quite the opposite side, but I went to another church outside of LA.
Did they have a mirror and you looked in it?
You're cute. Called Rocky Peak Church, and a wonderful church in the LA area. And they have this beautiful property in the foothills above the San Fernando Valley. And so their tech was giving me a tour of their campus, and then he goes out in the parking lot and he just kind of points to a hillside on the other side of their property. He says, yeah, we own that area. Also, that is what is known as Spawn Ranch, where Charles Manson and his disciples pretty much set up shop in the 60s. And so that's where they lived. And so he said, we still have, like weird tour buses that come through every single week so they can show the tourists Spawn Ranch where Charles Manson lived. He said, yeah, it's a bit of a blessing and a curse, I guess.
I don't know what to say to that.
I know. I mean, you are a direct descendant of Charles Manson.
Toby,
are you not?
we weren't going to tell people that. Also, do I sound normal to you? I sound weird in my in-ears right now.
I mean, you look super weird.
Man.
And I'm sitting right next to you.
Must have
No,
been
you
all
sound
that
totally fine.
Underwater aerobics. I just
Yeah.
got back from the Olympics.
I mean, maybe you put your in-ears in the ground port of the AC plug as well. And that's what's the problem.
Local man dies from electrocution. But speaking of a man that would never die of electrocution, a custom cabinet maker and occasional audio engineer, John O Neal, our guest. John, welcome to the Church Gear Podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
John, have you ever sat through as much nonsense as you just did for the last 5 minutes?
Well, I tour for a living, so yes.
Well, that doesn't count the 25 minutes it took us to get us going. This might have been the longest delay we've ever had to get going.
I mean, in your defense, Blake, you had to find an SD card for audio. And
You
not
said
video.
any SD card would work, you freaking liar. You know where liars go, Toby. To prison.
Well, with Charles Manson?
Yes. Is he still alive?
I believe he's... John, do you know if he's still alive?
I don't know. You want me to Google it?
Sure.
Dangerous
I mean,
Google.
I'm sure our listeners are doing the same thing right now, unless they're driving.
I mean, it's not the worst thing you'll find on my search.
Toby literally just got a call on his computer from an unknown number. I wonder if that's Charles Manson
No.
calling in.
He's been dead for almost 7 years.
Oh, all right.
Shows how up to date we are.
Yep.
All right,
Yeah.
man. Everyone is calling now. The boss is calling. Are we sure the company's not burning down?
It might be. It's possible.
2 out of the 3 execs at Church Gear have tried to call you in 5 minutes.
Can they listen live to this podcast?
They're like, y'all need to shut it down. You're
Yeah.
doing badly. While Toby checks in on that, I will start our 5 truths and a lie. This is our weekly segment where we introduce the guests with 5 truths about their life and 1 lie, and we try to guess. And it's a pretty dead heat. We're in August, and it's between Toby, me, and the guest, and it's pretty rounded out now. Number 1, I'm a classically trained pianist.
Okay. I'm proud of you for saying pianist correctly. That's a word I was assuming you would say incorrectly.
Also, is Church Gear burning to the ground? Am I still getting a paycheck? Are we good?
Oh,
Right?
you're definitely not getting a paycheck, but I think the company's fine.
All right. Number 2, I love roller coasters, but I'm deathly afraid of bungee jumping. I get that. Number 3, I live my life under the assumption that all dogs and most other animals love me, but I'm terrified of all bugs, spiders, and snakes.
I get that one too.
Last night, I got a text from my wife. A dead lizard had somehow gotten into our laundry room.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common occurrence.
Gross. Number 4, I'm an avid fisherman and hand make all my own lures.
He's an avid fly fisherman.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
But he said he didn't like bugs. Why is he fishing for flies?
Wow.
Number 5.
That's the worst dad humor I've ever heard.
Swish. Number 5. I have had at least 2 very near death experiences since becoming a touring audio engineer.
I believe that one.
Number 6. Maybe he was plugging things into other different
Yeah.
things. I used to run a vegan recipe blog site. I just feel like that is the most obvious lie we've ever seen, so it can't be a lie.
He looks like a meat eater to me.
Yeah, this looks like a red-blooded
What does that mean?
American who he's grilled every 4th of July his entire life. I'm locking that in. I don't care how obvious it is. He did not used to run a vegan recipe blog site.
Okay. I'm going to say the roller coasters and bungee jumping is the lie. I'm going to say actually he's the opposite. That he likes bungee jumping, that he's been bungee jumping, but he hates roller coasters.
That would blow me away.
Yeah, let's find out.
All right, John. Toby's got the bungee jumping. I have the vegan recipe blog site.
Well, I definitely hate fishing. I've never been fly fishing in my whole life.
Dang it.
Everything else is true.
Wow.
There was a period in my life for a little over a year that I was a vegan. And so I kind of dove in head first. And
Okay. How did that year do for you? Did you feel the difference and enjoy it, or
no, not really.
was it you were kind of required to do it as a health decision?
No, I just kind of did it as a health decision because I, just had kind of tried everything else and just wanted to go about losing some weight a different way. And it just didn't really work out as well as I hoped it would.
Can you be a vegan while touring as an audio engineer? I'm just assuming you're...
It's not easy. It's easier than it used to be, I think. A lot of catering companies and a lot of, tours will sort of respect that. lifestyle a little bit more easily. It's not that they don't want to respect it, but it's just another, I don't want to use burden, but it's another ask of a promoter and a catering company to sort of do that. So it was tricky, but I managed pretty well.
I can't tell you the amount of times I've been at a youth event where we bring the pizza in and my one kid's like, I'm gluten free. And I'm like, we don't want your gluten, even if it's free.
Well, eat the cheese.
Well, we do have one guy that tours with us that is gluten free, and it's not like just by choice. I mean, he has a severe, gluten intolerance and will get really sick if he has anything. So it is kind of tough for him, especially at night when we're doing bus food.
That sounds very tough.
Yeah. All right, John, do you have a favorite roller coaster or favorite theme park?
Well, Cedar Point up in Ohio is definitely king for roller coasters. I've ridden everything there a few times. Kings Island up in Cincinnati has some great ones. I would say my favorite ride as far as like just straight roller coasters is probably that Millennium Force at the Cedar Point, just because of the height of it. But I haven't been there a long time. There's probably something better now.
Blake, have you been to Cedar Point?
I'm not a roller coaster guy.
I've never been there either.
Well, it's the place to go. It's like ground zero.
Yeah.
John, I want to ask you about your near-death experiences, but I also don't want to step on our disaster stories at the end. So if we ask you about your near-death experiences, will you still have a disaster story?
Yes.
All right. Well, great. Tell us the two near-death experiences.
Okay. Back about 20 years ago, I was on tour with Newsboys, and we decided to work with a audio vendor here in town that had a VDOS rig, an old school VDOS line array. And these days when you have L-acoustics, you usually have a tech out that's been through the training and taught all the ins and outs of all the rigging and all the safety stuff and all that. Back then, I basically went to the place. They showed me how to fly it. A guy came to our rehearsals, showed me how to fly it. We put it in the air. He said, that's it. That's as easy as it is. And it was pretty easy. But there's just a couple of weird limitations in the rigging hardware that I was not made aware of. So we were in a venue and I had to fly the PA. It was 12 boxes aside. So it wasn't like the full limitations of the flybar or anything. But it was connected to the front of the flybar by these little angle bars that, they have all these loose pieces and everything. And the real strength in the rigging system of the VDOS is the back bars that connect everything from top to bottom. And there are these massive steel tubes, and like you could hang a Mack truck off of it.
Wow.
But the front straps, the front straps are just little double stud, like old school fly track clips that go in. And they're really there more or less to hold the angle in place. And then when you ratchet strap it from the back to do the pullback, it puts all this tension on the front of the array. And then in the software, if you know that you're looking for it, if you tilt it up too much, it will say warning, 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 don't do that. And it says that because there's so much tension on the top of the array that the strap that's holding like this will literally pop out of the track. And then it caused the speaker system to violently swing backwards, all 3,500 pounds of it. And I was standing directly behind it as it popped. And a friend of mine, Ralph Rivera, who works for King and Country now, was standing there and somehow miraculously grabbed me by the shoulder and yanked me out. And if he had not done it, this line array would have crushed me in between itself and the stage. And I would have very possibly been killed, if not seriously injured.
You owe your life to Ralph.
I do.
We actually have Ralph on the other line to...
okay.
He's calling in the favor now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I bought him. I think I bought him a couple of hamburgers or something.
Wreck-It Ralph really came to save the day. Also, that means his life's worth a couple of hamburgers.
Yeah,
there was
totally.
this one time where we were coming back from a debate trip when I was in college. We're in these big passenger vans that are so dangerous. My cousin won't insure them. And this dude shot across us on the interstate, and he went off the interstate, got back on, and like saved us all. And my mom goes, I'll buy him a Chick-fil-A fry. And so for the rest of the trip, my friends are like, your life is worth $3.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So John's is worth a couple hamburgers.
Yeah. And this is not the first time we've heard of near-death experiences with line arrays falling on people.
It's actually so much that I'm like, who goes into production? It's too dangerous.
Yeah, or rigging.
It's pretty bad. The only other the other near-death one wasn't related to production at all, but we just happened to be at the beach in New Zealand, the northern tip of the North Island, and the surf was crazy, and there was a crazy rip current.
Ooh.
And we were just out in the water, and everybody decided, all right, it's time to go back in and go to where we're staying, and we'll get some dinner or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll be right there. And I saw this wave come in, and we had been diving under the waves and coming up on the other side. And I dove under this last wave, and I popped up, and I spun around, and I was just in the middle of the ocean, basically.
Oh my gosh.
And no one was there except for the young son of this friend of ours who just happened to do the same thing that I did. And I'm not lying when I tell you I got caught in a rip underwater current and dragged probably an additional 75 feet out into the water. Whew. When I popped up. And then, I'm like, oh gosh, what do I do? What do I do? Remember your training, John. Remember your training. Like, lay on your back. Just lay on your back and it'll take you back in. Well, I did that. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation or had to try that, but waves just kept pounding me in the face. And I was, panicking, and he was panicking. And we had a good friend of the family of the guys that we were there with, and who happened to be like a triathlete. These lifeguards that were off duty, but just happened to be at the beach that day. It was actually a holiday. So there were no lifeguards on duty. They came out on their surfboards to save me. They were even having a hard time with it. And then this friend of ours, who's, like I said, a triathlete, great swimmer and everything, he ran out. He basically took charge, and he told them, they said, you get the boy back. And he hopped on the back of the surfboard that they had gotten me on. And he said, John, I'm going to get back here between your legs. And he stuck his head right up between my legs. He said, you push yourself forward on the board. I'm going to get between your legs, and you and I are going to kick, and you're going to paddle with your arms like your life depends on it, because it does.
Yeah.
I said, yes, sir.
Wow.
What?
And we got back in, and it was crazy. I was shaking when I got back. I didn't tell my wife for about 3 days.
Luckily, that was the year he was a vegan, so he was in much better shape.
Oh my gosh. Well, John, that's I feel like we've gotten quite a lot on your background now, but still, give us some of your production background. You've been around the block a time or two. Give us a quick snapshot of your background in production when you weren't running from rip currents or falling PAs.
Well, I'm 54, so I've been at this for a while. Probably got started doing sound and stuff a little bit when I was kind of high school age at my church back in the late 80s. Sort of did that for a while. We were a very traditional Southern Baptist church. I think we thought that we had like an old 16-channel Allen and Heath mixer with like 2 aux sends, and I don't even think we had an outboard reverb unit. I think it was basically just a basic board. We had like some weird graphic EQ that we probably bought at like Circuit City or something. Some old Altec speakers on the wall. I just ran sound for the services. It was basically the choir, piano and organ, which I never even mic'd any of that stuff. Usually a soloist and the preacher, and that was it. I was, 4 or 5 channels at the most. I don't even know that we had monitors back then.
Yeah.
But
this is all sounding very familiar to me, John.
But yeah, right, John, Toby's about 15 years older than you, so he probably, very similar time range.
Exactly.
I thought it was a little bit bigger of a gap. But
yeah. Maybe 20 years older.
Maybe. But so anyway, so it kind of went from there as I got older in high school. I got more interested in, like, I was a musician because, you know, as you remember, I'm a classically trained pianist.
Yeah.
So started playing keyboards in small bands at my church and high school and stuff, and ended up being in a few bands, picked up the bass, became a bass player, singer, keyboard player, that sort of thing. Band thing didn't really work that well for one reason or another. I mean, bands are kind of hard to be successful in. So I ended up making friends with some guys in the Atlanta area where I grew up. And I don't know if y'all have heard of these bands, but Small Town Poets.
Sure.
And The Waiting. We were all really a tight-knit group of guys down there. And in 94, they were going on tour together for the very first time. Neither of those bands had record label deals or anything like that. They said, "Hey man, we're going on tour. We're going to be gone for about a month. And we need a guy to go out and do sound for us, basically, and just kind of help us." And I'm like, "Cool. Well, what does it pay?" Because I had a gig. I had a job at like this little local record label in Atlanta, just selling stuff over the phone. And I hated every second of it. And all I wanted to do was music and stuff and sound and that sort of thing. So they're like, "Yeah, well, what we're going to do is the keyboard player in the Small Town Poets has got a credit card, and we're going to go out and we're going
Nice.
to we're going to pay for everything on the credit card."
What could go wrong?
Right. And then, you know, a couple of the churches are giving us, you know, like, you know, $500 or $1,000 or something like that. Little honorarium, and the rest of it's going to be love offerings. And we're going to come back and we're going to pay off the credit card. And then whatever's left, we're going to divide up evenly. I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they said, "So are you in or you out?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, let's roll." So I did that. And then after that was over, I just kind of stuck with The Waiting, became their production manager, tour manager, sound guy, lighting guy when necessary, truck driver, van driver. Did that for 4 or 5 years.
Did you make enough to pay off the credit card?
I think I got paid like $200.
Wow.
For a month of work, that's more than Blake.
Shoot.
I know.
I'm
right?
impressed.
It almost covered my rent.
He's going to get a text that's like, "Hey, that card was never paid off and it's now $100 million.
Right?
Compounding
Yeah.
interest.
So after, you know, I was, like I said, worked for The Waiting till about 98 or 99. They got picked up by the management company that the Newsboys is under.
Mm-hmm.
And their manager really liked me as an audio guy. And so he kind of, you know, basically said, "Look," he's like, "I could really use you up in Nashville if you ever want to move up here." And he brought me up to Nashville and put me to work. I ended up working at a local sound company that he was part owner in. And this is, by now we're like 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
Started working as a sound system engineer, front of house tech guy on tours and festivals. I did a tour with the Sonic Flood for a year.
Mm-hmm.
I did a Supertones tour, toured with Out of Eden. And I just did a lot of general like audio engineering stuff at festivals and, you know, just multi-artist events and stuff like that. And kind of got my chops by, you know, over the next couple of years, probably mixing at one time or another, probably 50 or 60 different bands.
Yeah. Dang.
And trying to work on my craft or whatever. And then 2002 came along and some personnel shifts started happening in the Newsboys crew, and their management came to me and they said, "Would you consider, you know, giving this a go? Like, come out with us for a few shows and see how it goes." And 22 years later, here I am.
You've been with the Newsboys that long?
Yeah.
I don't think the millennial brain can comprehend someone working somewhere for 22 years. That's quite impressive.
I know. We have crew guys. We definitely have crew guys that work for us right now that they were all alive when I started, but they were probably some of them were definitely in like preschool and kindergarten.
Well, if you started in 1999, I would have been, kindergarten. I would have been failing kindergarten that year. I failed kindergarten.
For the first time.
Well, yes.
And Newsboys are the drummer's famous for having kind of a circular cage, right? Am I remember that correctly?
He's like on a spinning turntable, tilt-a-whirl kind of thing. Yep.
Did you ever get to be in that while it was moving?
I have ridden it before.
You ever had to mic up the drums while it's moving?
No, we usually do that before.
How fast is it moving? Doesn't he get dizzy?
You got to Google it. Just look it up, man.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. There's all kinds of videos of it. If you go on like some of the disaster pages on Facebook, like rigging disasters and stuff like that, you can find it in there. They're just ripping us apart.
Of course.
Telling us, Tommy Lee did it first, which is true, but then saying, well, Slipknot did it first too. And I'm like, well, actually that's incorrect. But
get our facts straight, people.
Yeah. We might have stolen it from one guy, but we didn't steal it from those guys.
We mark our morals at one steal, not two.
No, they introduced the spinning drum riser to the public in 98.
Okay.
So it has been around for 26 years. And it's the same. We use the same machine, the same wheel. We wire it up the same way that we did on day one.
Yeah.
It's just it's heavy. It's like that. I can't remember what it is, but an old Saturday Night Live sketch or something about a log or something. And it's like, I don't even know. I'm just going to stop talking because I don't know what I'm talking about anymore.
We are recording on a Friday evening with John, so we're all pretty tired.
Yeah.
So having been with Newsboys for 22 years, I'm sure you've seen some people come and go as part of the tour. And so I'm curious, what are some of the behaviors or activities that get you kicked off tours as opposed to what allows you to stay on a tour for 22 years where the artist trusts you that long?
Well, I mean, honestly, the biggest thing with a group of people, and I mean, I think this would apply to touring groups or church groups or anything, is you just have to respect each other. You have to respect each other's boundaries. You have to respect each other's roles. Stay out of everybody's business if you don't need to be involved in it. Be positive around everyone. Humility goes a long way. Discretion, it goes back to if you're on tour with an artist and you're on a bus with them, you got 12 people crammed into a tour bus. You get to know everyone's personal drama, at close range, and just, trying not to make things that shouldn't be public and, that sort of thing. That'll get you kicked off a tour pretty quick.
Is it common for people to get kicked off tours?
Oh yeah. I got kicked off a tour 2 years ago.
What?
What did you do, John?
John, you're so nice.
I don't know. I guess they didn't like my mix or something or whatever.
Do you feel like, John, it's different in the church world that, or is it kind of the same spirit where you've still got to, respect the boundaries and just be a good teammate?
I think being a good teammate is it's just a good plan everywhere. I don't really work in the church world these days. I observe it because I attend a pretty good church. I attend a church of the city. So it's a pretty good sized church there. And I can kind of tell that the people that work there are like family, and we go into churches at least once or twice a week on tour, and we play shows in there.
Yeah.
And I can kind of tell when I'm in a church where there's a healthy atmosphere among the people that work there, or it's some weird hierarchy thing where the production lead is a jerk or something like that. I think it's just good common practice to just be respectful of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Blake, you jerk.
Toby.
I mean, it's good to be good at your job. I mean,
yeah,
that's
Toby.
definitely important. But I mean, I've toured with lots of guys that might not be the best at their individual roles, but they're just a good guy. It's good to have them around. They make people happy to have them around. They're a good hang. That's that's another really important thing.
That's called a personality hire. That's a big trend going around right now.
It is.
I'm for sure a personality hire.
Yeah, you're a professional friend. That's what we call them.
And
you have the artist. You have the artist that goes out, like a solo artist might go out, and they always travel with one person to kind of help them or whatever. But they're not really there as a road manager, but they're just there as a professional friend, basically.
Yeah, I feel like we've been beating this concept just into the psyche of all the church production community over the last, decade maybe, where we think of the gear and we think of the technical side of things and we think, why am I not getting, paid well? And you forget the whole people side of things, the EQ, the soft skills, that you have to have both in order to be a great hire, a great team member of church production and touring world. Like, you have to have both if you really want to succeed.
Yeah. And you have to be able to earn the confidence of the people you're working for as well.
Yeah.
That's why Toby started his own company, because, it doesn't matter his personality if he's the boss.
Because now I can just fire you, Blake. So, John, you've been around gear for several decades now, coming from a small Allen and Heath analog console to what are you mixing on Newsboys tour these days?
We actually switched a couple of years ago. Well, no, not a couple of years ago. A little over a year ago, we switched to the Waves LV1 platform.
Okay.
Finally left your Mackie board, huh?
Yeah, I got rid of it.
So
we had been on Digico. We had been on Avid for a long time. Went to Digico, and then now we're on Waves. And before Avid, we were obviously on gigantic bass fishing boat size consoles with thousands of knobs.
So, John, do you have any fortune teller capabilities where you like to imagine where the production world is headed over the next decades?
And if you have the Powerball numbers.
Yeah.
I don't have those. As much as I enjoy mixing on large line arrays, which I think that's probably the best thing that's happened to the audio industry, honestly, is not the consoles, but just the technology and PA systems and how great they are. Like, even at a mid-range level, how great they are compared to the old gigantic things. I just can't help but feel like at some point, because we're so far advanced in like in-ear technology and wireless technology and all that, and with iPhone apps and just DAWs, and how much more accessible personal mixing stuff, like for people's phones and like GarageBand and that sort of thing. I can't help but wonder if we're eventually going to get to a place where we don't carry PA systems anymore and people show up with their AirPods and somehow the tour is broadcasting either a left-right mix from the front of house engineer, or you have the option of I'm sending out stems to the audience.
Yeah.
Where, if you're sitting in your seat and you're like, I can't hear the vocal anymore. Well, just open up your iPhone and just turn the vocal up a little bit. Or if, it's too tinny or whatever. And I just wonder if that's ever going to be a thing. Like, obviously there's a big push with immersive audio and that sort of thing, which takes up more room in the truck.
Yeah.
And I just, as interesting as that concept is, being in the touring world, I just don't see a lot of, unless they're massive artists that have millions and millions of dollars of budget, I don't see a lot of artists saying, how can we take more trucks out on tour?
Yeah.
They want to say they would like us to be in a 16-foot trailer behind the bus if we could be.
Okay, Blake, I want to talk about this concept. It's like a silent disco.
I think D&B is shaking in its boots right now.
Yeah.
And
it is a lot like a silent disco. That's exactly right.
And I mean, potentially you could also have both, where you have live audio coming out, but then you can put in, if you have custom ear molds, it will largely block a lot of that out.
I mean, you already have a lot of the infrastructure in place with listening, assisted listening and that sort of thing. And I just don't think it's that big of a leap.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I also see this as the next MXU event where you come to a live mixing events where you bring your DAW and they send out stems, and then Jeff can just press a button and check on anybody's mix and give them feedback in the moment. Like, that'd be a fascinating thing.
Yeah, I haven't gone to an MXU event. I'd be kind of interested to peek in and see what's going on.
Okay, so if we were able to do the silent disco, it would fix the issue of volume in the room. But for now, there is no
issue.
So I've always said if it's too loud, you're too old. But there have been a couple Sundays where it's been too loud for me, which seems insane.
Toby, you are pushing 85.
I know.
John, that is insane.
What is the secret to finding the right volume for the room?
Well, before I actually get serious, I've made a list of some of my favorite phrases and quotes and responses to people.
Yes.
When they do come up.
Great.
And
listeners, please take notes.
Quotes. Yeah. The first one is the most common. Is it going to be this loud during the show? And then the response is, oh no, it's going to be way louder during the show. Number 2 is, why does it have to be this loud? Well, it's because you bought a ticket to a rock and roll concert. Do you go to the amusement park and complain that the roller coaster was too fast? Number 3 is, so how many watts are you guys using? And the answer is all of them, every last one.
You should have said 4.
Yeah. You want me to turn up to 5? You give me some.
Blake wouldn't know the difference. He'd be like, "Wow, that's a lot."
This one goes to 11. Number 4. This is something I always tell system engineers at festivals or whatever, especially if I've built some sort of rapport with them. I said, "Hey, man, if they didn't want you to use those red lights, they wouldn't have put them there." Number 5 is from a friend of mine, and I don't know, I'm sure he didn't come up with it, but it's if you ain't redlining, you ain't headlining.
Nice.
Okay, this last one isn't a quote, but it's an actual anecdote from 20 years ago. Same tour where I almost died. We were doing a show in a big church in Austin, Texas, and had our VDOS rig in there. 4,000 people. It was a big church show. One of the biggest Newsboys albums that we've had since I've been with the band. About 4 or 5 songs into the show, probably sitting at a 103, 104 A-weighted volume at front of house. Typical rock and roll volume. Everybody's doing great. Tour manager's into it. The crowd is going nuts, jumping up and down, singing along, everything. And I'm just sitting there at my console, bebopping along, and I feel this tap, tap, tap on the back of my shoulder. And so I turn around and I see this dude who's, I don't know, maybe 30, 35 years old, just giving me this death stare. And I'm like, yeah. And he leans into me. Because it's so loud, he kind of has to yell. So I don't want to say he was yelling at me per se, but he wanted me to hear what he said. He said, "This is entirely too loud," like that. And I taken aback, and I put my finger up, and I'm like, hang on a second. And so I sort of peered around, and I did the full 360 scan of the entire venue, top to bottom, front to back, left to right. And then I came back and I leaned into him and I said, "I think I just found 4,000 people that disagree with you."
Nice.
And then he did this number, and and I shrugged my shoulders and I turned around and I just went back to work.
You should have just handed him a set of earplugs, be like, "Well, here you go."
I don't keep earplugs. So we do sell them, of course. My merch guy doesn't like it when I turn stuff down because it hurts his sales.
Yeah.
But anyway, to be more serious, obviously, I don't really honestly get that many complaints at our shows, even though I do mix pretty loud. And I think the simple answer is that if it hurts, it's too loud. If it doesn't hurt, you're okay. You're in the clear, basically. Yeah. And I've been to lots of shows that were at 95, 96 dB, and it was painful to listen to. And it just really came down to the mix being not very good. Mm-hmm. Not enough low end. I mean, you want your mix to be powerful and you want it to move people, so if you can move people physically, then you don't have to destroy their eardrums with volume to get them impacted by what's going on in the show.
Yeah.
And, I do have a reputation in our industry for being one of the louder engineers. I know I'm not the loudest, I don't think, but I mean, people certainly act like I am for some reason or another, but as I get older, I'm probably a little bit more sensitive to it than I used to be. And our audience is getting older. Audiences in general at Christian shows are changing. I have a theory that ever since COVID happened and we all got stuck in our homes for a year, people started having to go to church online, watching it on their TV, watching it on their phones, watching it on their computers, listening to music in their AirPods and everything, that we kind of got resensitized to volume. Mm. And once concerts started going back out on the road, I think it's kind of took people by surprise at how loud it actually is compared to what they've been used to. So it's like getting out of a swimming pool in the middle of summer and then not going back in for an hour. And then when you jump back in, the water feels cold again, even though it felt great when you were in there.
Yeah.
So I think a common way to sort of get around it is, you kind of want to ease your audience into it, maybe not come out of the gate, trying to kill anyone.
Yeah.
And then just let them come along for the ride with you, just kind of ease into it. I mean, it is a little bit of a journey that you want them to go on with you anyway. So, I've definitely made the mistake in my career of coming out way too strong and not having anywhere to go. Or getting too loud at some point during the show and realizing, man, this is not doing anybody any good right now. Like, I need to back this out and start putting some dirt back in the hole I'm digging. So,
and I've realized it's also, part of the responsibility of the worship leader, the music director, to create moments in the worship set, because if the band just comes out punching and the whole time it's, full volume, everything going, like the congregation just gets tired. And so just to create those moments of rest where our ears and our voices and our bodies can like take a break and breathe for a few minutes and then come back in, you change the complaints, the perspective of the audience when you just have those moments of rest.
I think that probably 90%, all statistics are made up on the spot, but 90% of volume complaints can be remedied by fixing what's wrong with the mix.
Yeah.
Like most of the time, I think that when someone says it's too loud, that's the only way they know to communicate that something doesn't sound right. And if it was the same volume, for example, if the guitar was burying the vocal and you couldn't hear the words of the song that you wanted to sing along to, you might get someone that comes and says it's too loud. Well, what if I turn the guitar down and turn the vocal up and it was exactly the same volume level? Would it still be too loud? And I think the answer to that usually is no. That would fix the problem.
Yeah.
So it's weird to me, I guess. It's not weird, but I find myself, because I've been doing this as long as I have, I run smart during my show and I have a calibrated measurement mic up, and I can pretty much tell you that by the time I get to a certain point in the show, I know that I'm going to be sitting at about 103 peak, average of about 100.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had a black cloth over my computer screen and I couldn't see what the number was, I could tell you what it is, and you flip it up and there it would be.
Yeah.
Because it's just a familiar feeling to my body and to my ears. You know, it's like, I know what I want the mix to sound like, and I know how I want it to feel to me. So I think a big part of it for people is getting to that comfort level of just being able to trust yourself to know where you're at. Another really important thing that I do during the show is I'm constantly looking around at the audience to see how are they reacting. Are there a lot of people doing this or hiding under the pew or something like that? If there's one or two of those people down front, or, you know, an older person or a little kid that's got earmuffs on because, you know, they're super sensitive to volume, and that's one thing. But if you got a lot of people, if you got 1 out of 3 or 4 people holding their ears, then you're probably not creating the environment that most of the people want to be in. And it's not going to hurt anybody's feelings to turn it down a little bit.
Yeah.
But if it's just 1 out of 20 people or 1 out of 50 people or something like that, and everyone else apart from that person is having a good time, they're smiling, they're singing along, they're clapping, or, you know, whatever people do these days to show that they're having a good time at a concert, then I think you're on the right track. So,
yeah, I know for my parents who are ancient at this point, if they're at a Gaither concert, there is no volume that is too loud for them. So kind of like we said,
I know.
It depends on preference, perspective, the source material. Blake, you're just looking at me laughing like, you know, my parents' choice in music is a total disaster.
Who the heck is Gaither?
You don't know
that sounds like
Gaither?
a fake name.
No, this is a very real thing of, you know, old gospel vocal music, worship music.
The name is Gaither.
Well, Bill Gaither is the founder, and the Gaither vocal band, the Gaither gospel group. They've been famous for, I don't know, 60 years in the church world.
Dang.
I know, but old people love them, Blake.
Huge business, huge
Sounds
money.
like the Christian Zach Brown band.
Well,
John, you got a take there?
Yeah, I was just going to say similar to that. It's you know, like Toby's saying, some people it's just going to be too loud for no matter what. I've had people come in, you know, when I was a kid and doing sound at my church. If we had a guest group, like we had Truth there once at my church, and they would bring in their own sound system, and it wasn't like Truth was loud, but they had speakers that you could see, you know, and they were these big black speakers that were stacked 10 feet, 12 feet tall. And it wasn't a loud concert, but they brought their own PA in, and you had older people in the congregation that would come in and see the speakers. They're like, oh, this is too loud. And you haven't even started the dang show yet.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I know that there are still churches today that I'll walk into, and they will have come in and redone all of the audio and the video and the lighting, and they've put a really nice line array in, but they've buried it behind a cloud up in the sky because there are big financially powerful members of the church that don't want it to be too loud, and they don't want to see these speakers hanging there because they just have a visceral reaction to it.
Man,
it's completely irrational and unreasonable, but it's the world we live in.
Letting a couple of key church members decide things like that is a disaster. And I would like to hear a disaster from you, John, a disaster story. You know, we've already heard you almost die twice, so third time's a charm, I guess, assuming if you've got a third near-death experience or if you just have another audio disaster story for us.
Well, I mean, if Ralph Rivera from For King and Country wasn't a scarier guy, if he was a scarier guy, it might have been a near-death experience. But we were on tour with them, same tour as the VDOS, same tour as the guy tapping me on the shoulder.
You had quite the ride.
I know, that was a fun tour. And it was the first tour we had ever done with digital consoles. And this was 2004. And it was Newsboys and Rebecca St. James, sort of a co-bill kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we had an opening act, and I can't remember who it was, but I think I was mixing the opening act. And then it was Ralph's turn, and then it was my turn to headline the show. And I finished the opening act. Ralph walks up to take over the console, and the order of operations it was a Yamaha DM2000. In your show file, I would hit the save button, and then I would hit the down button, which would go down to the next show in line, and then enter. And it would recall you would save the previous show and load the next one, load the next scene or whatever. And I was just finishing up my show, about to switch show files. Ralph walks up to me and puts his hand on my shoulder and starts talking to me like, how'd it go? How's the room? Whatever. And sort of distracted me. And instead of going save, down, enter, I went down, save, enter.
Whoops.
So I saved my opening act file over Ralph's Rebecca St. James file.
Well, it was Ralph's fault.
Well, maybe, it's my fingers were on the buttons. But anyway, it was during the show. So we literally had like a 5-minute set change to get the opener off and get them set. And as soon as I did it, I knew what I had done. Like, I just instantly knew. And, this is 20 years ago. Digital consoles were new. File structures were new. Nobody really had a good handle on file management and how to not screw that up. And when the Yamaha PM1D came out, it was like everyone that would go to a festival with one of those things and do a sound check would go back to their console, and it would be completely different than it was when they left it because just nobody knew how to do it right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I erase his show file. I look at him. I'm like, dude. He's like, what? I said, I am so sorry. He said, what? I said, I just stored my opening band scene over your show file. I said, do you happen to have it saved anywhere? He's like, no. And I didn't have my show file saved on an external.
Yeah.
I think it was like a little SD card at the time. And we just didn't. We were stupid, and we just didn't have it backed up. And I said, all right. So I get on the comm and I call down to stage and I tell my monitor guy, I said, I just wiped out Ralph's show, so we can't start yet. He's like, all right, let me know what's going on. And I'm like, okay, we're on a Yamaha console. Okay, here's what we're going to do, Ralph. And Toby, I don't know how familiar you are with these, but you have your input library, you have your output library, which are patch libraries. You have your patch library and your head amp library, and then your effects library. And all of those libraries come together and are associated with your show file. So if you recall those libraries individually back into the console, it isn't your show, but it's your show structure, and it's like a starting place.
Okay.
So I said, here's what we got to do, Ralph. We just got to load your libraries in, and I'll do whatever. I'll stand here with you. I'll help you get stuff working if you want me to or whatever. But that's the best we can do. Like, I can get you basically to where you're doing a throw and go on a console that's fully prepped.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, man, let's do it. So we load them up, and then I think we gave them about 5 or 10 minutes to do a real quick line check with the PA, with the crowd in the audience, with the audience in the room rather. And he dialed it up, and, the show happened, of course, because it always does. I felt terrible.
Did the artist notice?
Management definitely knew, because they were there, and it was, their dad, David Smallbone, was their manager,
Yeah.
and manages for King and Country now. And I turned around. He says, "What's going on?" And I told him, I said, "Dude, I totally screwed you guys up." And I said, "I'm really sorry." He's like, "Well, that's okay. Mistakes happen or whatever." And the next day we got there and we loaded in and we gave them about an hour sound check that afternoon so he could dial things back in.
Yeah.
But I mean, apart from me almost being killed by a PA system, that's probably knock on wood. I've had pretty not terrible things happen.
Yeah.
On the road.
And did Ralph ever forgive you for that?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
He doesn't talk to me that much.
I mean, Ralph keyed his car, but they're good now.
Yeah.
Well, John, we've learned a lot in this episode. We've learned to have a Ralph nearby because he'll save you from death.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we learned how to survive a rib current, have a other triathlon friend nearby. What kind of tech takeaway would you give us to kind of wrap this episode if you're talking to a room full of church production people to, make their Sundays better?
One thing, I mean, I love the church I go to because it's probably the first church I've been to in a long time where I could actually go and not be stressed about it not sounding good or looking good or just being complete amateur hour or whatever. But sometimes I think that, I don't want to step on any toes, but I think that churches might put too much emphasis on visual aspects and making sure that the lighting is great and the video is great, perhaps, or that the stage looks cool or whatever. But they don't work that hard to get the mix to where I think that it would benefit them a lot to really get their sound guys working on the mix, getting things prioritized better in the way things sound. I hate going to a church and not being able to hear the vocals, which happens all the time, and I don't know if it's a stylistic thing. I'm not a church guy. I haven't mixed sound in a church since I was a teenager, and it was way different back then. But, I've been really impressed in the last 10 years with what churches have been doing production wise. And it certainly makes my job a lot easier. But we go in to these churches, and I might pop in the second service just to kind of listen to the system and see if I think it's going to be something that I can use to make the day go smoother. And I'm like, yeah, the system's great. I said, why does it sound like this? Like, it's not loud. I mean, they could turn the vocal up another 2 or 3 dB and it would fix it for me. And, I don't know. I just feel like they put a lot of money into all this fancy gear and everything, and then they don't end up with the best end result. I don't know if it's because I'm sure a lot of it is that these are, novice volunteer guys. I know some churches have professional audio engineers on staff that know what they're doing. And I think that's the case at Church of the City. I think a lot of the guys that mix there are pretty good.
Yeah.
I think just trying to, stay the course and make it sound as good as you can. I mean, it looks great. The lights are cool and everything, but if you've got a song going and your sound guy's got the vocals, which are, arguably the most important thing in worship music.
Yep.
And you can't understand the words and it's a ballad, then something's not right, and it's nice. It'd be nice to hear all 3 of the guitar players on stage at once, but I know that's a big ask for a lot of bands anyway. So, but I don't know. That's just kind of a frustrating thing for me, but
yeah,
I've landed in a church home where it's actually pretty good. So
that's great, Blake. It's kind of like the Church Gear podcast. We invest in all this equipment, and then unfortunately our listeners can hear your vocal. And so I feel like, where's the mute button on your channel on this mix?
Please,
Blake?
if we had a mute button, we'd be using it on you, Toby.
Girl, please.
yeah,
Nope.
yeah,
nope.
it is. It has been a little bit of a Mickey Mouse operation. I was wondering if I could give you guys a bad Google review.
Yeah, I would.
A Mickey Mouse operation. That's amazing. Well, John, man, we appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything you'd like to plug or point people towards?
As you said earlier, I'm a custom cabinet maker. So if anybody out there needs some really expensive custom cabinetry, you can find me on Instagram or on the web, clovercroftwoodworks.com, or just Clovercroft Woodworks on Insta.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I thought he was kidding earlier when he said that. So
No, he's legit, man.
No.
that's cool.
How do you think I live in this luxurious mansion?
Yeah. Mixing audio for a living. Our listeners are like, please, please, please.
That's probably how I got into this situation.
Yeah.
It's not currently how I'm staying here.
Makes sense. Well, John, thanks for joining us. And if you need some custom cabinets, reach out to John.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Hey, listeners, we're introducing a segment called Church Tech Confessionals. This is a time for any church tech to anonymously confess the worst thing they've ever done in church production. Here's one now.
So I was on a tour in 2015, and we were having some trouble with the current console, and we decided to call the rental company because we had to get a new console because our front of house guy was having issues. So they brought us a new console. We got it all set up. Everything was working. After sound check, I walked up to take a photo with everyone at front of house, had my coffee in my left hand, tipped it over while I was taking a picture, and I dropped my coffee on a bank of 8 faders. And I burnt out 8 faders on the console for the rest of the tour.
Hey, if you have your own 3 to 5 minute church tech confessional, record it and email it to blake@churchgear.com. Don't worry, we'll apply a voice changer and keep it anonymous. Your secret is safe with us. Your pastor will never know.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Blake, I'm thinking of a new side hustle, and I'm not very good at cabinet making, but what's something you feel like I could make that could put me in a mansion?
I think you'd be a great cocktail maker. Just put a pound of sugar and then go from there.
Alcohol usually gives me headaches. Speaking of headaches, go ahead and sum up this episode with your nonsense about sharing it, Blake.
I'd say that to take, I don't get workman's comp for the headaches that Toby gives me, so it would be a great lift to my soul for you to share this episode on Instagram and tag us and say your favorite part about it. Just don't say it was Toby.
Now I have a headache.